So now that Halloween's over and everyone's done their take on horror and you're all thinking about Thanksgiving and the holiday season, I'm finally getting around to posting my video about how I think horror is done right in role playing games. You've all heard the usual things, the mood music, the low light, blah, 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 all that stuff. You've heard advice about using jump scares and body horror and blah, 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 blah. Well, my take on that is that using a jump scare can be a good thing, but of course rapidly becomes overdone and in and of itself is not horrifying. It can be jarring and take people a little bit out of their normal paradigm, and that helps. It keeps people off balance and not sure what to expect, which done once or twice in a game session can be effective. But by and large, jump scares get old, as we all know. They don't make a good horror game. The other horror that you commonly see is what is referred to, I believe, as body horror, where you have a terribly decayed human corpse with something strangely wrong about it, or animal mutilation, or similar things like that. But the truth of the matter is, seeing that and experiencing a dead, mutilated animal or a decayed human corpse in real life is very different than in a game. In and of itself, in a game, it's just not that horrible. It can help induce horror if you give it the right build-up and present it the right way. But in and of itself, it's not a complete source of horror, just as jump scares are not a source of horror. They're things that set the stage for the players and the characters to experience horror. Again, this is just my opinion. What I have found that works for bringing genuine horror is the boiling the frog method. You've all heard the old saying, you put a frog in a pot of water and you slowly increase the heat, and since you do it gradually, the frog doesn't notice it until you've boiled the frog. Inducing horror in your player characters and for your players can work the same way. You start out with something that's disconcerting. The Blair Witch Project thing with the bloody tooth found wrapped up in the cloth. You open Dr. Carl Stanford's desk drawer, and inside you find a lock of human hair with a bit of still fresh bloody flesh attached to it. And the trick, though, is you engender a response from the characters that brings them into the horrific behaviors. They find a threat, and then they have an old book, and they read something out of the old book that pushes the threat back or keeps them from being cursed. This is not something that's part of the normal human paradigm, and they've participated in it. Later they use the old book or something else that they come across, and something vaguely distasteful, blood from a dead lab rat, in order to keep a monster from attacking them. Finally, you build up to, if they're going to keep Yog-Sothoth at bay, who is driving these monsters toward them, or Hastur the Unspeakable from coming up out of the Lake of Hali, then they find their characters have to participate in a ritual that requires them to do something that is completely abhorrent to normal human behavior or clearly an insane process. And if you lead up to the moment right, at some point at the climax of the adventure, the characters will find themselves in the press of events, and you push them along rapidly at this point so that there's not a whole lot of time for introspection. They'll find themselves doing something where everybody at the table suddenly stops and looks at each other and says, hopefully, something along the lines, in character or non-verbally out of character, "What on earth are we doing?" And the real beauty of this is after everybody gets up from the table for the night and they're on their way driving home and they're going through the adventure in their head and they're thinking, how did I get pushed into, in character, doing something like that? And at that moment, you will know you have done real horror and you've done it right. Now, it's not easy and it's hard to sustain. I've done it only a couple of times in running games for many years and been in games only a couple of times where that happens. But if you can make that happen, that to me is the best kind of horror. It's real horror, horror for the character, just a little bit of horror in the player who's running the character, especially if they've been role-playing the character well and are really in that character's mindset. And you kind of go over the events and you realize somewhere along the line, we crossed the line into crazy. That's a great moment of horror. And the best, as far as I have been able to experience, that's the best kind of horror. Anyway, that's kind of my take on it. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you would. I'd love to hear from people, and I'm hoping to get to know a bunch of people this way. So let me know what you think. And even better, do a response. Thanks for watching.